Hi everyone, my name is Evelyn Garduno, and today I will be going over the middle school lesson plan that I designed and taught to 7th graders. This particular lesson goes over middle school Art 1 TEKS that are basically designed for an entry-level art class for middle schoolers. Those TEKS being C1B and C1D, where students were expected to use and apply the elements of art when creating and discussing their own artworks, and while working in a non-objective art style. Students will also discuss and understand that artists create art as a way to express their emotions and as a way to communicate. Additionally, the lesson went over TEKS C2C, in which students will create their own non-objective painting while incorporating printmaking by creating a stamp of a word that they chose when answering the question, "What do you wish for others?" Lastly, the lesson went over TEKS C4A, where students were expected to defend and explain their artistic choices and processes in a written artist statement using the appropriate art vocabulary. Overall, the lesson places a heavy emphasis on academic art vocabulary that students should be learning and incorporating into their academic language, while also incorporating a little bit of social language into the lesson. Now, in order to critique and support my lesson, I will be incorporating experts from Goldenberg's articles. First, I will be introducing the 3 experts that support my lesson, and then I'll be going over the 3 experts that critique my lesson design and delivery. My first expert comes from page 5, where Goldenberg discusses that generally effective practices that are likely to be effective with English language learners. In this section, he creates a list of these practices where he mentions the importance of providing clear instructions, supportive guidance, as well as effective modeling of skills and procedures, all of which are stated to have demonstrated a positive effect on EL's achievement when incorporating into one's lesson. As I made sure I was providing clear instructions to my students and modeled what was expected of them. And as I was introducing these new art forms to them, I made sure to break down the process into easily comprehensible steps. And I made sure to model each step for them. So for the painting process, I chose the word love. And as I was painting, I explained the process and the reasoning behind my artistic choices. So as I was painting, I was choosing the colors red, pink, purple to represent that word, because those are the colors that come to mind when you think of the word love. And I would use soft lines instead of jagged lines, and that's just how I went about it throughout the lesson. My second expert comes from page 6 from the section titled Sheltered Instruction, which can be used within a classroom to help further EL's English language development. And in the list provided in this section, there are 2 things that stood out to me as I was reading, which are using pictures, demonstrations, and giving additional time for discussions of key concepts. And in my lesson, I incorporated the images of the artists that pertain to the lesson, like pertain to the specific art styles that we were discussing. So for example, Wassily Kandinsky, who's a well-known non-objective artist, I incorporated paintings of his, and then I also incorporated pieces from Glenn Ligon, who is famous for his prints and for his pieces that have big text all over them or just text on them. And as I introduced these artists to the students, I would ask them questions in order to get them engaged in discussion, and I would have them talk about key concepts. So I would ask questions such as like, what do you think the artist was trying to communicate? Why do you think they chose these specific colors or these specific shapes? Like, what stood out to you? And then additionally, the students could also use the images of the artist's pieces in order to gain inspiration for their own works. I also made sure to provide student samples of finished pieces, so students could see what was expected of them, like at their grade level, and they could also use those images for inspiration as well. My last expert that I will use to support my lesson comes from page 19, where it is stated that English language development should emphasize academic language as well as conversational language. For my lesson, not only did I incorporate academic vocabulary, but I also added other vocabulary terms that students would encounter in their day-to-day lives and as they socialize with others. Those vocabulary words include stamp, communicate, and object, and I did so as a way to teach the more academic vocabulary words such as printmaking, non-objective art, and additionally, the students were able to explore the meaning of other words, of other social words, as they brainstormed using the question that I provided for them to create their piece. So words like love, peace, joy, happiness, words like that. Now moving on to my critiques. My first critique comes from page 10, where Goldenberg discusses instructional support in the home language, and he mentions using cognates to teach vocabulary words. When teaching my lesson, I wish I had used cognates in order to teach the vocabulary I was presenting, as a way to make learning the vocabulary words more accessible to my students. For example, one of my vocabulary words was communicate, which is similar to Spanish. In Spanish, the word communicate is comunicar. Both have a shared meaning and common etymological roots. And a lot of my students are of Hispanic and Latin descent. So I wish I could have incorporated cognates into teaching the vocabulary words, and I could have easily done that. My second critique comes from page 20. Goldenberg states that devoting more instructional time to listening and speaking yields significant higher levels of oral language proficiency. And although I do have instances where students are able to listen and participate in oral class discussions, I had them discuss about the artist's paintings and the meaning behind that and things like that. And as well as when we did our little mini gallery walk, where they discussed and critique each other's work. But I actually wish I had carved out extra time into that little gallery walk. I wish I could have actually changed it into critique time, like a class critique time, because that's when students really use their academic vocabulary to explain their pieces to each other. So students would come up one by one. They would come up and present their piece, talk about the meaning behind it, the artistic choices, and then they would stand there and wait for their peers to give feedback on it. So yeah, that's where really the academic art vocabulary does come out. And then I think the way I designed the lesson, there wasn't enough practice of using the vocabulary words when speaking. Like when doing class discussions like that, the way I designed it at least, you only really hear a couple of kids here and there, and it's not like you hear every individual student speak and practice using those vocabulary words. So yeah. And finally, my last critique comes from page 27, where Goldenberg states how incorporating home language into instruction has actually shown to contribute to growth in both home and English language skills. In my lesson, I wish I had provided certain instructions in my students' home language, or even offered brief explanations in their home language. Although I did let my students brainstorm and use a word in their home language when creating their piece, if they wanted to, I feel like I should have incorporated their home language more when providing explanations and when going through the process of the step-by-steps of creating their piece. And he also states that Spanish-speaking children who experience Spanish interactions with their teachers were more likely to engage in more complex linguistic interactions than children who only experienced English interactions with their teachers. And I could have done that as well, you know, offer more Spanish interactions with my students instead of just interacting with them in English. And those are all of my 6 experts that support and question my lesson plan design and delivery. And thank you so much for watching.